financial empowerment. That's what it means to me. 0860 103 091.
Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. I'm Lerato Mbele. Our focus tonight are the weekend bombings in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. But first, the headlines. The CCMA has been brought in to try and resolve the strike at South African Airways. This follows a rejection of the latest wage offer by the two major unions. On the table is an SAA offer of 5% and a once-off payment of 1,600 rands. UESA and SATAU accuse SAA of not being flexible. In the meantime, all international and regional flights have been cancelled. This leaves passengers inconvenienced for the next few days. Domestic flights will continue to be assessed on an hourly basis. Donovan Moodley has pleaded guilty to 3 main charges of kidnapping, extortion and murder. This is in connection with the disappearance and killing of Lee Matthews, a 21-year-old university student. Moodley's trial got underway at the Johannesburg High Court today. He confessed to planning the kidnap and murder of the young woman. She was abducted from Bond University in Sandton on the 9th of July in year 2004. The body of Lee Matthews was discovered 12 days later in Walkerville Manor near Vereeniging. Donovan Moodley was arrested 3 months later. The case has been remanded until tomorrow when argument and mitigation of sentence will begin. The Scorpions have arrested the mayor of the Mangaung municipality and 4 senior officials. They're accused of fraud, theft, corruption, and of contravening the Companies and the Income Tax Act. The mayor, Babi Mokoena, was arrested together with his political advisor, the Speaker of the Provincial Legislature, the city manager, and the Chief Operating Officer. His wife was also taken into custody. The arrests follow a Free State imbizo by President Thabo Mbeki 2 weeks ago. The president lashed out against corruption, nepotism, and poor service delivery. The 6 will continue with their bail hearing tomorrow. Staying in the Free State, the wife of the late Nobi Ngombane appeared in court today. Ngombane was the head of the policy unit in the Free State. He was killed outside his home in Bloemfontein earlier this year. On Friday, Ngombane's wife was arrested with 2 of her sisters. The 3 have not yet been charged, but the police say they're investigating charges of accessory to murder and defeating the ends of justice. The case was postponed to Wednesday when they will appear with their brother and niece. The African Union has provided $1 million in emergency aid to Niger. The West African state faces a hunger crisis because of drought conditions. The situation was made worse after an invasion of desert locusts last year. All of this has reduced the production of cereal by up to 200,000 tons. The African Union has warned that the country's 12 million people face massive starvation. If rapid action is not taken, the emergency aid will be given directly to the government of Niger. The cracks seem to be widening within the leadership of the Inkatha Freedom Party. Now Dr. Sabc3, the party chairman, has criticized the manner in which the IFP is run. Reports say he told an IFP youth rally in Durban yesterday that the IFP is run as a dictatorship. As a result, it will continue to lose elections if internal processes of democracy are not improved. Dr. Gianni is said to have the full backing of the youth brigade. IFP youth have openly defied party bosses. They went ahead with yesterday's rally. This is despite an order by the IFP leadership to cancel the event. Observers see all of this as a formidable challenge to the authority of Dr. Mangosuthu Buthelezi, the president of the party. Recent events come hard on the heels of the postponement of the IFP National Conference. Sources say this was done to allow leaders the time and space to deal with dissent. Well, now joining us on the line is Dr. Sabc3, the chairman of the IFP. Dr. Gianni, thank you very much for your time. You're quoted in SAPA as having said that the party is run as a dictatorship. Why have you lashed out so publicly at the leaders of the party?
Well, that was not lashing out at the party. I was merely expressing as honestly as possible and in a desperate way, of course, the condition that leads to our repeated electoral setbacks.
For the past few weeks, Dr. Gianni, there's been talk, especially within the media, of a huge rift in leadership, and it's been said that the problem is in particular between yourself and the IFP president. Can you tell us right now what your relationship is with Dr. Buthelezi?
Yeah, what's important is that I was elected by the conference also was elected by the conference democratically, and we all perform duties as expected of us by the conference. And in the process of doing that, I think that always we must never forget the primacy of what the people wanted. Now, our relations, we have a duty to work with one another, with each other, in trying to fulfill that which the people elected us for.
I think what I'm trying to establish is it difficult for you to have a working relationship because the two of you have very different perspectives on where the party should be going ahead of the municipal elections and just generally how it should be operating as a political movement?
Well, I heard here at Nseleni that the president also pointed out that the party was not ready at all for the oncoming local government elections. He said we needed to put our ducks in order. These are his words. We all realize that the party is not ready for the elections, and we realize this, and we express our desperation at this. So we see eye to eye. In fact, we have a similar view as regards the state of readiness for the party.
Concerning that particular issue, what do you think the problem is? Do you think it's a question of mobilization, or do you just think that ideologically the IFP has really lost touch with the realities of a new South Africa, and that issues such as tribalism, as it's perceived, is quite pervasive within the party? Do you think the party is in need of major reform?
Yeah, I think so. I think the party is in need of transformation. That's my view, my honest view. I mean, any party that loses elections over the past 10 years to almost 50% of its electoral victory previously must have a serious introspection.
And then what's the view of the IFP leadership with regards to questions of transformation?
This is an IFP policy. It was launched by the president last year, the policy of transformation, that as the only solution to the problems of the party in reversing these electoral defeats, there has to be a thorough transformation. And that's the president of the IFP in last year's general conference made that very well known as a policy of the IFP.
All right, so there's consensus.
Really implementing it, yes.
If you're fired tomorrow when the IFP holds a press conference following this emergency meeting that happened today, what's your political future, and what happens to some of the reforms that you've been known to be advocating?
Well, I'm expecting that the IFP will respond to any situation through the democratic method, which I said is the only key for us coming back to our successful ways. Now, if they do stick to the democratic method, they would have to convene a special general conference to deal with my issue, because I was elected by the general conference. But if they choose another method other than the democratic one, that of internal democracy, then they can see it within their power to use any structure, a structure that is subsidiary to the general conference, to take such action against me.
All right, and obviously we'll be watching events tomorrow as they unfold. All the best wishes. Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Sabc3, chairperson of the Inkatha Freedom Party. After the break, we unravel the factors that could have led to the bombings in Egypt. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the news at 10 on Sabc3. Pakistan says it doubts that any of its nationals were involved in the weekend bombings in Egypt. This follows reports that Egyptian police are seeking 9 Pakistanis. They want to question them about Saturday's terror attacks. Well, close to 90 people were killed during the blast at the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh. Islamabad says it rejects the impression created that Pakistanis are prime suspects. Reports say photographs of the men were distributed in the media today, but Pakistan says Egyptian authorities have not passed on any information to its embassy in Cairo. Now, UNISA political scientist and a specialist on the Horn of Africa, Iqbal Jasbai, joins us from our studios in Tshwane. Wanted to say Pretoria there and not be very, very PC. Iqbal, thank you very much for coming through. This is not the first terror attack on Egypt. There was one last October, but the current one, should that be seen in the context of events in Britain?
There's little doubt that events, whether they're in Egypt or for that matter in Cape Town, are very much impacted by developments in the Middle East or for that matter other parts of the world. I think judging from the last attack in Egypt on the resort of Tana, what emerged was led by a Palestinian. So the discontent in Palestine overflows into Egypt, or for that matter can be felt in Cape Town. So one of the factors is the huge discontent felt on action in terms of bringing justice to the rights of the Palestinians. This is just one foreign policy issue, and you can see in many of the statements Muslim groups put out, or groups which allege they've undertaken these attacks. It's very often the discontent, the inaction on key issues like Palestine, Iraq, which emerge as a key factor and can be felt in Egypt as well as in Nairobi, or for that matter in London. So there's, yes, broader links in terms of foreign policy issues which can be felt now on the African continent as well.
What about Egypt's foreign policy that is perceived to be very pro-America, or rather takes its cue from the American government? Egypt, of course, being the third largest recipient of U.S. military aid. Is that a factor?
There's little doubt that the majority of Muslim groups, in judging from their literature and the way they perceive Egypt, see it as a close ally of the U.S. and the type of positions it has taken on key foreign policy issues. So very often when they would want to choose an attack, they would choose allies of the U.S., and that has come through. Also, there's little doubt that the local pressure, one of the key points which were discussed over the past few months at the African Union level, at the level of political movements, say in South Africa, is that the most deepest and dangerous structural fault line in world politics at the moment, or contemporary society, is the very stultifying, very sad poverty, and that is a time bomb in itself. Egypt has a growing population. As you know, it's the second most populous country in Africa, and some debate that it's the third most populous country in Africa.
Let's deal with the internal, then, dynamics of Egypt. They've had a problem over the last 20 years of fundamentalists. Fundamentalists are said to have assassinated Anwar Sadat almost 20 years ago. But through a state of emergency, the Egyptian government has been able to curb the threat of fundamentalism. What's the situation now, then?
There's no doubt that the challenge it's facing is one which most Middle Eastern countries face. I think the exception is Palestine, where we've had free and fair democratic elections, is to open up the political space. There have been successful experiences like Jordan and Turkey, where they've opened up political space, allowed Islamic groups to come up, and it's somewhat a phenomenon like Christian democratic movements or political parties in Europe. And I think once you repress movements like Muslim groups like the Muslim Brotherhood and other groups, they would find other avenues, or the young and upcoming leadership find there's no space. I think we know the challenge Egypt is facing. September 7th has been announced as the election date for the presidential elections. But we have been familiar with some of the struggles there, meaning it'll be the first time in its history where the presidential elections will allow a number of candidates. But there have been a number of criteria been placed on the candidates, and the jury is still out whether that will be a free and fair leveling process. The point you mentioned, the emergency has been in force since 1981, where people cannot assemble reasonably freely.
Okay, so the situation within the country leaves much to be desired in terms of an open democratic space. What about within the region? Egypt is usually seen as a peace broker within the Middle East, particularly in the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Are they still regarded with incredible credibility?
There's no doubt Egypt has a very pivotal role to play within the Arab world, within Africa. But it's challenged by its own internal democratic practices. And I think the manner in which it will deal with its democratic experiment will determine its very future, its credibility as a peace broker, its credibility within the Arab-speaking world, within Africa. And as we know, Egypt had played a very strong Pan-African role during the period of President Nasser, Sadat, and the current role has been a mixed record. But I think clearly also we can see U.S. foreign policy has shifted. It previously supported leaders who stayed in power for 20-odd years, but it's now putting pressure on a number of countries because it has got to see that that's not a sustainable option to allow leaders to stay in power. And as you know, I think this is the challenge President Mubarak faced. He's keen to run for a fifth term, a fifth 6-year term. So that would mean more than some 24 odd years in power.
Okay, that's where we have to leave it. Thank you very much, Iqbal Jaz, biopolitical scientist from UNISA and specialist on the Horn of Africa. The economic costs of the strike at SAA, that's the focus of your business news with Morafe. Stay tuned. Good evening. Taking a look at your business news now. Wall Street is trading lower on the back of disappointing news from Xerox Corporation. The office equipment maker kicked off the week with lower than expected results. Reports of mergers and acquisitions have not done much to boost the market. Shares of digital technology company Avid Technologies are up 1.3%. This after the Pinnacle Systems rejected a bid by private equity firm Vector Capital in favor of Avid's proposed measure. Shares of Motorola jumped 3.4%. This after reports that the company's stock could climb 25% as it unveils new gadgets. A short while ago, the Nasdaq was 10 points down. Existing home sales in the U.S. rose to a record of 7.33 million in June. The figures went up by 3%. Economists had forecast a rise of 7.15 units. Meanwhile, crude oil prices are trading lower, this on the back of better than expected global oil supplies. This was reflected in last week's petroleum data, which reassured the markets. In earnings news, shares of number 2 chicken producer Pilgrim's Pride are trading higher. The company reported better than expected earnings. News of possible deals also drove shares of Maytag and Whirlpool higher. Maytag gained 6% and Whirlpool rose 5%. A short while ago, the Dow Jones was up 38 points. Taking a look at your local indicators now. The rand is weaker against the dollar following the weaker euro. The JSE Securities Exchange continued its record-setting pace today, reaching a new high. Traders say demand for local shares and the weaker rand boosted the market. Gold is currently trading at $426.06 a ounce. Platinum's at $888.50, and the spot price of Brent crude is $57.93 a barrel. SAA says it's not in a position to determine how much it has lost since the strike by its workers started, but observers say the airline is losing millions of rands. They say the airports company of SA will also suffer a loss due to the reduced number of flights. The company derives some of its income from landing fees. The airline has had to cancel all its regional and international flights. Domestic ones are being assessed on an hourly basis prior to departure. The workers are demanding an 8% increase, while SAA is offering 5% across the board. There's also a once-off payment of 1,600 rands. Now the CCMA has been called in to facilitate the talks amongst SA, the Sabc3, and the United Association of South Africa.
If we are cutting down costs, 1.6 billion, we cannot afford, therefore, to increase our offer.
We will continue with the strike until SAA come with what we want.
Joining us now to talk about the implications of the strike is SAA's Human Resources Manager, Viwe Mlenzana. Good evening and thanks for coming through.
Good evening.
Firstly, why is SAA taking a hardline stance considering the fact that increases in the market generally are between 6 and 7%?
Well, I don't think SAA is taking a hard stance. I think it becomes important generally for people to understand that SAA has come up, is coming up from a very, very difficult past. We have had a situation where we've been making serious losses, and we need to be responsible in the way that we deal with this particular organization going forward.
Which is what the union members are arguing against. They're saying that last year the company was in deficits and this year it has made a profit, yet it is not offering them the increase that they would like them to offer.
Well, I suppose that's one way of looking at it from organized labor. But what we do know is that the airline industry is a very difficult industry. The profit margins are very depressed. It also becomes important that the little profit that we have realized in the past year, we actually, in fact, make sure that we protect that particular profit and we spend responsibly going forward.
Well, most analysts are saying that you're losing millions of rands daily. How are you going to recover that money?
Well, currently we are in contact, we're corresponding with our customers to ensure that we retain them, and hopefully they will understand and be with us during these difficult times.
Well, the strike has done a lot of damage to the carrier and the country to some extent. How are you going to rebuild SAA's image?
Currently, we're very hard at work, ensuring that we put together recovery strategies. Obviously, I'm not in a position to discuss the detail of those at the moment.
It doesn't look like you went into the negotiations fully prepared, or were you?
Well, we were very prepared. Obviously, we were not expecting that this particular process will take so long. And as we started the process, we actually went into the process hoping that we will have a very speedy resolution.
But we saw passengers stuck at airports throughout the country. It seems that the contingency plans were not enough.
Well, you see, the difficulty with a strike is that you can never, ever be able to plan 100%. We have tried to do our best under the very, very trying circumstances. We have managed to move up to about 65% of our customers since the beginning of the strike. So yes, I suppose that there will be customers that are affected, but you know, we are comfortable that our contingencies are working very well.
And are you optimistic now that CCMA has been brought on board?
Well, we remain optimistic. We are going to go into the CCMA process with an open mind. Hopefully, we can find a very speedy resolution to the impasse.
Should unions not take the offer or should it not be resolved, what are you going to do, you know?
Well, we remain, confident that the unions will obviously understand the set of circumstances that we're operating under. And of course, we obviously, if the situation carry on the way that it does at the moment, we're obviously going to have to look at how do we sustain the business going forward.
Well, thank you very much for your time. SAA's Human Resources Manager, Viwe Lenzana. You're watching News at 10, and that's all from me this evening. More news after the break with Lerato. Enjoy the rest of your viewing. Good night. Welcome back. You're watching the news at 10, and it's your sports section now. We start with soccer news. Orlando Pirates, the winners of the Vodacom Challenge, have failed to qualify for the Telkom Charity Cup. Of the 4 teams that will take part in the annual event, Bloemfontein Celtics is top on the list. Celtics last participated in the tournament 19 years ago. They received the most number of votes, followed by Sundowns. Black Leopards came third, and Kaizer Chiefs just made it through. Pirates, however, failed to make it. This is for the 2nd year in a row. Sundowns face Black Leopards in the first match at 10 this coming Saturday. Chiefs will then take on Bloemfontein Celtics at noon. The final will be played later that afternoon. And on to swimming. Just after midnight, South Africa could have their first medals at the World Swimming Championships in Canada. In a few moments, Roland Schoeman and Ryk Neethling will be swimming in the finals of the 50 meters butterfly. Schoeman broke the world record in the event in last night's semi-finals. He touched in a time of 23.01 seconds. He beat the world record of American Ian Crocker, which was 23.30 seconds. Crocker is the 2nd fastest qualifier for this evening's final. Neethling qualifies at 5th. Suzanne van Biljon will be swimming in the semi-finals of the women's 100 meters breaststroke. Good luck to our swimmers, and your weather's up next.
Hi, good evening. We are expecting a few showers tomorrow morning in the Cape Town area, but that rain should clear away by mid-morning. Partly cloudy conditions all the way along the southern Cape Coast. Quite cold weather, though. High teens forecast for the Eastern Cape, and then some evening rain arriving over northern KwaZulu-Natal by later on tomorrow. Dry and windy weather continues to sweep over this eastern highveld as berg winds affect that region. Temperatures overnight dropping fairly low, though, -2 for Vereeniging and for Bethlehem, -5 for Standerton and 5 for Ermelo. Just warmed a little bit along that east coast by the offshore flow. And it's going to be mild in Cape Town, despite the wetter, a low of 11 degrees, but up to just 17 degrees tomorrow, remaining in the teens all the way along the southern Cape Coast. 19 for East London, 18 for Port Elizabeth, slightly warmer for KwaZulu-Natal, but a hot day up in the northeast. 31 for Musina, 30 the high for Palaboa. Have a great one. Cheers.
With those temperatures, Simon, we will. We've come to the end of tonight's bulletin. We'll be back with more tomorrow. Until then, from me, Lerato Mbele, the 10 o'clock news team, and the crew working with us, we thank you very much for your time. Good night.